The human brain is one of the most remarkable organs in the body. It is responsible for everything you are and everything you do. It guides decision making, blood flow, everything that you can think of, personality. So I think the idea here is to help you explore how your brain is set up and some of the systems and the way that it works, and be able to position that to create understanding for some of the reasons and some of the behaviours that we display within sport. Before we explore in a little bit more detail, here are some fun facts about the human brain. It isn't fully formed until you're 25, so it's constantly developing up to that point. Your brain's storage capacity is virtually unlimited. Think about your favourite TV show and constantly rerunning in an unlimited capacity. Now, the information travels up to speeds of 268 miles per hour within your body. And think about here that actually your storage capacity is virtually unlimited. That is so much information, and yet think about how quickly it can travel within the body. The brain is the organ behind your intelligence, your character, your personality, and every decision that you make. Now, apply that into a sporting context. It means you're probably going to be using your brain a lot in sport. The way to think about the human brain is like a big computer. And what I mean by that is it works by processing the information. Now, that information comes from our senses. We have those 5 senses. Probably add thinking and feeling onto that as well sometimes. But, for now, we'll say 5 senses. They bring in information from the environment. And our brain's role is to process that information and work out what is best to do with that information around behaviours and actions. Now, we can break it down into different areas here. So, we've got this first part, which is the frontal lobe. Now, the frontal lobe is involved in thought process, the emotions, our personality, but also the memory storage. Now, there's much more, but just trying to simplify it here so that you can really get a sense as to the different areas and what their roles are. The other areas are the motor cortex, which is involved in muscle contraction and muscle movements. Then we also have the parietal lobe, which is sensory perception. So as mentioned here, this is an important part, being able to access the information through our senses. Then the somatosensory is how we process that sensory information. So we've got this information, but then the somatosensory takes over and processes that and attaches a little bit of meaning. We then have the occipital lobe here, and this is involved in visual perceptions, colour form, and understanding this motion around how we can see things that are moving and then learn to predict when that's going to come, and maybe sort of we're going to have to take effect or take action on this moving object. Maybe this is all processed through the occipital lobe. We then have the final part here, and this is the area that we're going to sort of focus on today, which is the temporal lobe. And this is very much involved in the retention of visual memory, but also the language that we use. So you've got different systems, different structures, different roles within the brain. So within the temporal lobe part, there is this small, tiny system called the amygdala. It might be tiny, and it gets its name by being an almond-shaped object, but it is hugely important, and it plays a vital role in safety and protection. And this is where it comes down to survival. It is the part of the brain that is constantly detecting dangers and threats in our immediate environment. So therefore, one of the big emotions that is regulated by the amygdala is fear. And this is the fight or flight system. So we could say this, let's say you hear a story about something that happened down a dark alleyway. And then the next time you see a dark alleyway, these emotions of fear are brought up. Your amygdala is the reason why this happens. Its sole purpose is to scan the environment and detect danger and threats. And it's constantly doing that. It is like a smoke detector that doesn't need batteries, that is constantly being switched on. It never switches off, which means it's always, whatever environment, whatever context we're in, it's always constantly scanning that environment. The thing to catch, though, from this is that it is a old, unevolved part of the brain, which means as we've developed social complexity and intelligence, this part of the brain doesn't. It does not detect the difference between a real life or death situation or threat and, let's say, for example, embarrassment. making a mistake in a big match or competition. This is also involved in the fight or flight response, and unfortunately the amygdala has this override hijacking system, which means it has a trump card. So even if we essentially feel like the situation is under control, the amygdala has this override button that basically goes, no, danger, danger, threat, threat. And when we can understand that, we can start to explore some of the behaviours that we might display in a performance context. So knowing what you know now about the amygdala and its role within fear response, and the fact that it's one, it can't be switched off. It is constantly detecting the environment, but for threats and for dangers. And the fact that it is the unevolved part of the brain, which means it can't actually detect the difference between a real life or death threat or a social threat. Let's say, for example, embarrassment at making a mistake or worrying about an upcoming performance. We can start to navigate this and build our understanding and awareness as well for, as I call it, the prediction machine. The way that our brains work is it uses past experience to predict future outcomes. Just catch that for a second, because if we think about the time zones here, there's 2 time zones that are being outlined in this definition. But where do you play sport? Is it in the past? Is it in the future? Or is it in the present? So your brains work in the past and in the future and skip out the present moment. At best, your brain makes an educated guess around what could happen based on previous experiences. Never provides you with any facts or any certainties. And there is a big question here. Why is that? Well, I'm going to go out on a guess here and say none of you are time travelers, which means that you've gone into the future, you know what's going to happen, and now you've come back into the present moment. So if you've not done that and you are not time travelers, can you say with any certainty that you know what's going to happen next? That you know what's going to happen going into this big final or this big competition that you've had? You can't. But yet your brain tries to fill the gaps by making educated guesses and educated predictions. It primarily works in the past and in the future, and skips out actually where you play sport, which is in the present moment. Now, being more aware of this and the prediction machine, as I call it, can help you navigate it and manage your internal environment more effectively. It creates distance between your thoughts and your reality. So have a go at that next time and start to see the brain as this prediction machine. Not something that's trying to trip you up, just something that's trying to do its job in fill the gap and help you navigate your environment.